says it's time. All right, welcome to the Speakeasy, Prohibition style. Oh, this is so naughty and against the law. Yes, this is a nice intimate reading. I wore a special coat. I don't know if it has anything to do with Prohibition. It just felt something. I don't know.
Different. It looks old.
It's Jake's. So we have a great lineup. These two guys are reading, and Kazumi and Emily. It's going to be amazing. We're going to get started. Are y'all ready? Let's get it started! All right. So yeah, we're going to get started. Morgan's going to introduce our first reader. Let's get some music going for her.
Ooh, themed music. So Emily is the type of person that comes with themed music. I hear she bakes a beer cake that is supposed to be a really big deal. She also has this one hat that makes her look like Maria from Sound of Music. She's a second-year poet. I'm making all this up. Here she is! Yay! Spontaneous.
Because I'm a terrible person that didn't submit a bio or walk-on song until an hour ago.
It was fun this way.
Keep you on your toes. Okay, so, I am a big fan of this theme, but all of my stuff that is sort of pertinent is from a year ago. So, we're, flashing back here. So, this first poem is written in response to a trend that was big in the 1920s through the 1940s, where people would jump horses off of these really tall ladders into the ocean or pools, and women would ride the horses, so this is in response to that. Steel Pier, 1928. Waiting at the top of the tower for the gelding to climb the ramp at a trot, she picks at the hem of her wool diving costume. She knew a girl who went blind in this business, lost her balance, detached retinas, the mare's eyes bulging like someone's thumbs pushed them from within. Her nostrils flared for the sea. 60 feet could break most things. 60 feet could be a mercy. She falls with the horse, and from her elegance spools the rest. Her arm in a catfish's muddy den, horseshoe stamped in her brother's skull, lockjaw, sand under their cheeks, sweltering revivals, orgasm whirling and whirling and whirling, crushed luminescence, town fairy, Sarah's hands on her like thighs gripping a saddle, morning and dove call at dawn, hope chest, jam jars, aberrations, open and shut daylily in the ditch, worms that crawled into gut through feet, long hair floating like flames, red dirt, small coffins going north and north and north, smeared albumin, sunflowers rotting in a jug, the fullness of the gelding's eye, fiddle wine in June, falling like diving, like jumping, like dying, tower of steel, meconium, glimpse of breast under linen, dust in the folds of her eyelids, horseflies, lintel, Dr. I got a job for you, Carver, curlers, curry comb, and tufts of mane, puff of breath, stud sweat, purple birth, hay cutting, grease, fire, drawl, and stammer and bear it. How bereft, like myth, like soft lies, steel-edged and winking. The crowd drives them to leap for water, to climb a narrow ladder and fall. Goaded by blinders, shotgun, or love, they step off. Okay, this next poem is maybe sort of speakeasy-ish. Spiritualism was a big thing in the 1920s and 1930s, so I think it goes with it. It's called Promotional Seance. I would go so far as to hide things from you inside myself. Pulled from my skirts, the gauze becomes ectoplasm. The hairpin becomes the prick in your scalp that will not stop bleeding. I bring to you the 157 flowers from your father's gravesite. If my sisters before me did it, why should I not use my body to bring the world into containment before I release it in a different place than before? Mister, I invite you into a room darkened with deconstructed velvet capes. The mirrors are covered too, so as not to reflect anyone's inner light. Sit down at the table. Hold my wrist. There is paper for automatic writing, a cup of milk to be warmed and knocked over, sticks of incense to overwhelm you with the smell of your lover's shampoo. Here, have an informational flyer. There will be a silent auction of our latent desires, a raffle featuring the pillow on which my ass rested during the best sex of my life. Here, look at my hand, see how it draws portraits of your long losts, how the uncontrolled circling evokes a feeling of drowning. A borrowed ring is found inside a cotton ball, fake eyelashes inside a piece of felted wool. I want to summon the moments spent under a sweaty blanket with my next-door neighbor, who played the boy so I could continue to be a girl. She let me kiss her while we pretended my mother wasn't in the next room. Make the shame I feel when men look at me into a spirit I can exercise. You know, Ouija boards are fashionable now, and spiritualist societies have the best snacks. Our ghosts apport promptly the bone china cup, the lip gloss tube, the sagging lace-trimmed sock. All must be put back into place, circling your head in a dreary kind of dance. You see, I am selling the best parts of myself. I don't know any better than capitalism. I am explaining myself to you because that's what ghosts do. This is a promotional seance. You get what you pay for. If your heart skips when I lift the table with my thighs, that means I am finally fierce enough. I'm finally done with stage fright. Okay. This is another old one. Torch song. Circus girl, let that cigarette dangle like the long line of you from the trapeze. Your knees hooked over the bar, your toes pointed sharp as the apocalyptic end of it all. You move sort of smoke, sort of dry leaves. You swing sort of backdoor, sort of big band. Circus girl, the air has gone out of the big top. It is gasping for you, and good God, I am extinguished, watching your ankles spin through the night. Circus girl, let us finish all flourish, all grace. Flicking open your Zippo, I light these hoops in my chest. A few bones litter the straw-strewn cages. You high flyers see your own bright white parts blinking up at you as you leap from the bar. You glean your own stunting from the night. I think I'll name you June, for plum dark. I want to sit a while in your tent, to sup at your scent, your ripe scent. Come truth with the blown out torch, come strength to lip the heavy curve of your jaw. Tapped ash freckles on my hips last only as long as the Callaway record spins, and I always did love bloody things. The scent of straw in your hair, the audience's gape and spit. I dream of standing in his place, of catching you as you eye the sawdusted ground. Breathe light into these hoops here. True, our bodies go well water, go heat lightning in air. The somersault is a thing the body does alone. You're so full of tinder, neither tears nor teeth for what we do in the dark. I held your lips in the dip of my collar, the strength of our wanting keeping you still for a while, keeping you writhing then to cicada beat and higher yip. It's true, I fear you might burn from the inside. Roman candle combustion, and nothing left for my fingers but your point shoes. What risk? What specter of our straw house and the wolves in the night? My bravado, come swinging steel and oak, come spotlight on our skin, won't last. My mama told me much of the world, told me which women become torches to light steep paths. Okay, this last one is a newer one, and it is in response to an architectural trick called the ha-ha wall, which is when a tall wall is built into a sloping ditch. So if you're on this side of it, it looks like a huge wall, and if you're on that side of it, it looks like the horizon extends uninterrupted. And so it was used to like make land, estates look pretty, but also to like pretend like asylums weren't contained walls. The ha-ha wall. The particular Cupid's bow of my lips and my fat tongue shape my voice more than the clench and release of chords. So when I figure the gymnastics of saying the idea of your viscera leaves me in sweats, or that I adore you like a muscle that will snap itself for lifting, darling, I will enunciate so carefully. And I apologize for the gaslight flicker of my face. The muscles there feel electric. There is a certain pleasure, like the almostness of itching, when I wallow like a bow-legged mouse in the basement of the world. Through repeated sessions, I recognize the barely digested taste of bread as a reminder that your hair smelled of lilac, but their photos are nothing compared to the hem of your skirt. I want to be brave enough to continue with pleasure while covered in bile. You understand, darling, because you see the wall too. Which switch is the switch, miss, for Ipswich? From my wicker seat on the lawn, it looms taller than anything I have verified with my hands. Perhaps at its core it is a wall of cat's eye marbles, a wall of yellow grosgrain ribbon, a wall of crushed eggshell, a wall of bruised apples, a wall of teeth, gooey and browning with sugar, that informs us living in the body is a craggy business. From her little blue boat on the blue lake, my ex-lover insists that the horizon extends uninterrupted. Where do they go when they row, row, row? She thinks that if I wasn't such a tease, I would get up and walk to the edge of the lake, where the birds lance little wriggling things in the mud and cattails wrap thick like leather restraints. Promised. The prick of biting flies and the gentle licking of water against the beach, of her gaze on my damp ankles. Darling, you must acknowledge that the world is constructed without our consent, that I can never call you by your real name, that we know someone built me a maze on the side of a great wall, before they placed her like a toy in a boat to spin around the lake until I am weeping from laughter. I repeat myself when the needle skips on the wax cylinder. We listen to so much music here. There is a little lane without a turning on the way to home sweet home. Thank you.
Our next reader is Kazumi Chin. Kazumi is a poet from El Cerrito, California. He plays lots of games and writes lots of poems. His poetry game that he's been working on for a year now has slowly transformed from a game into an entire way of looking at poetry that is actually helping him write his manuscript, which is happening. The difference between, this is a quote, the difference between poetry and rhetoric is being ready to kill yourself instead of your children. Audre Lorde. And R.I.P. my friend. Please welcome Kazumi.
So today, in my creative writing class, we were talking about this story, and it's a nonfiction story, and my student was like, well, I was wondering how much of it was the writer and how much of it was the character of this person. And I was like, I think you can't make that distinction. And he wanted to know, like, what were the facts of it. And I was thinking that okay, so there's this guy, he's like a hermit, right? This is on GQ. He's a hermit, and he was living out in the forest in Maine, and he would break into different houses and steal stuff, right? And so he was like, what are the facts? And I was thinking, the only facts that matter are the ones that will betray us. And so the point of writing is to make them not, I think. And so that's where I'm at right now. I'm thinking about Mike Brown and stuff. Alright. Let's see, what am I going to go with first? Okay, how about this? This is a poem for Amelia. So we were looking at Amelia Earhart's ship, and I think she fell on an island and didn't die, and there's evidence of her making like a hut on the island and living there for like, I don't know, like, I don't even know how long, but we think she survived, and we couldn't find her ship because there was like a lagoon in the middle of the island or something, and it disappeared, and so when they sent search parties over, they couldn't find anything, and so I was just like, that's crazy, and so this is a poem for Amelia. To better worship the sun, we whip the skin of the enslaved into small castles at the moment of siege. Shipped bricks on backs for stained glass men on crosses. Believe these men with beautiful hair falling over their faces could snatch sin like flies in their webs, their constant arachnid hymns searching for that something human to capture. But I want the flies to slip through those strands, escape into my pockets like gnomes, stealing away from the garden inside me, pulling islands up from a sea of threads, those forgotten castaways like words once uttered by a god knocking on the window of my skull, begging to be let back in. Sin, like hair, belongs until it doesn't, screams out, take me back, even as I repent, and oh, how I wish I could. The baldness inside me opening like a mouth to swallow the sky sin, the cloud sin, every sin that soars across the island that is me, the gull, the albatross, you and your airplane. I fall to the urge to capture you, bring you life and death inside the poem, show your engine spinning beneath itself on a reef in some pocket of the Pacific, empty frozen wing of an endless mansion, but I worry I only want to use you, chew you up and spit you out like the reef where you landed. This is my sin. This is where I seize with cursed intent, my cold iron slot machine turning one coin after another, coiled into a slit throat, one metallic tattoo boiling down my arm, searching for the sevens in you. I want you to be more than just another poem, but I'm not sure I know how to love you. Because if I shoot the weather vane, the wind still blows through this temporary life I've landed in, all the lines of my poems crossing until they can only speak to me. I become an airplane circling, one voice speaking to itself, a one-of-a-kind prank with no punchline, nobody laughing. For so long, I've wanted you alive. Even a century later, felt you in static shocks between my sheets, falling through clouds in my sleep. I wanted to leave the dizziness that comes with these dreams of you, but I couldn't stop touching what I knew wasn't dead yet. Is it such a sin to kick my sinking tires, to wish for them to breathe again? My feet have no other place to land. Each time they touch the pedals of my car, I feel like I'm walking on the moon, staring back at this tiny blip of blue that I thought I belonged to. And I want to go home. I wouldn't say this yesterday, but today they found your plane and I couldn't see the reason this transmission kept sputtering under the hood of me. Then I dropped my keys between my legs, got caught wanting everything to stop. All around me, broken scraps were raining down. I put my pants on backwards, torched my toast until it hurt, watched the brains of myself spilling, and I just wanted to hold them, you know? I tried to spin in an instant, one revolution, to envelop my whole poetry, pour gently your memory into being, so that I might see. It's so selfish of me. No boat, no coat, no ocean ship sailing, or maybe 20, who knows, with your plane lost in the fog. Amelia, let this poem be not as the rest. Let me breathe for the first time the same air of that cursed beginning where you lived. I want to feel those broken clocks stopped, unable to weave your rescue watch, to take back the sky that lost you. Where was God when the throttle itself began to fly? Where was God when it blew apart and learned your name to dance to? When I say I want to go home, what I mean is I want my body to be holy. When I say I'm not sure how to love you, what I mean is I'm winding this watch, even as you lay in wait for its dying, and you are holy, holy, holy. You are, you are. Alright, so I've been touching on this idea of body and home a lot, so that's also going to be in here too. So this is going to start with home, and this other one's going to end with home, so we'll see how it goes. Alright, gyoza. I know when I return home at last, my mother will take a knife to cabbage for hours. We'll fold dumpling skins and drop them into boiling water. We'll stop to pull back with cracked fingers her hair now white. It will catch the light and glow, and I will want it black. When I close my eyes, I can see her dark, dark hair. I am guilty of burning her body this way. The fire erupts from within me. I am obsessed to the point of hunger, each limb engulfed by flame. When I was 5, I believed I too could become a mother. I could sink inside my breast so slim, I could sometimes starve myself too. When I looked in the mirror, there were tiny bows in my hair, pink. Yes, I have wanted to be glamorous. I wanted ribbons, the girl in the mirror. Her smile could hit those notes I could not. If I could touch her, I would. But I would not give my body to another. There's nothing romantic about this. To ask her to become beautiful, I had to forget that my mother is my mother. I wanted her to look the way she did at 30. No, I can't seem to speak truthfully. I wanted her to be in love. I thought it could make her rise like oil to the surface of her body. Please, I take it back. Her hair, her hands, her knife. I would ask that this be love, would ask that she be oil, that she be water, for her always to rise like that to me. And this one is called Swimmers. There has never been another swimmer inside this body, not as this body swims, not as this one. But when I move an arm, another arm is moving. And inside that arm, another. This is how I understand it. Child, immigrant, not yet arrived. You will see the shore and wonder why it is that you came. You will be offered 6 seeds and no acre of land, and the seeds will not be what they say they are. They will bloom only in winter and only in your hands. We, the diver collecting oysters, the glittering shell of abalone. Sometimes at night the eels sneak inside me and they find her, and that is when I wake from my dream, still emerging from my past life. I was a girl who loved to dress up for parties. She was left-handed and did not belong to them. She painted her nails every day. Her favorite color was purple. She was not beautiful. She looked like me. If it appears to you as the sun, it is most likely the sun. If it appears as rain, it is most likely rain. She didn't care. She came for what she came for and left. I wanted it all. In my dreams, I have burned countless dresses and set them on clotheslines to hang, but each time they float away. To cross a border with a dress, to cross-dress, who lived by the cross, who died by the cross, who crossed their heart and hoped to die. I am crossing the street to you now. Tell me, will you take me? Tell me, will you take me home?
Before I introduce our next reader, I just need to say that Rachel, I had one of your lemon bars at the bake sale today, and it was amazing. Oh, amazing. All right, just keep that in mind. All right, our next reader, Morgan, loves dogs, Chipotle, and any themed event that allows her to wear a costume to speak easy. She hates lemon dessert. science fiction, and she loves telling people that she makes stuff up for a living. Yeah, let's bring up Morgan!
Sorry, Rachel. I wrote that before. My mom always used to make like all these like lemon cakes because she was on a diet. She would be like, here's a lemon cake, and it was just not. It's not what I wanted. But that perhaps speaks to my own issues with chocolate. So I'm just really exhausted, man, and I'm like deep in revising all these short stories. So I'm gonna read something very new. I wrote it today. Very weird and very short, so that's good for you guys. It's a retelling of the story of an hour, which is actually only 1,000 words, from the perspective of a beloved character who I think is underestimated and misunderstood. So, it's called The Story of the Christmas Eve. Holly tells the old woman the news gently, afraid of spooking her. She puts a hand on her shoulder, places a bright red mug of cocoa in front of her, looks deep into her crinkly blue eyes. He had some turbulence over Greenland, ma'am, she says. Ice storm, might be tough to get through, but we're tracking it best we can. She considers the old woman for a moment, holds her at arm's length as she inspects her expression. Only when she is satisfied with it does she rush from the room, barking orders into a headset. But the old woman is not worried. This happens every year in one form or another. Christmas travel is hell no matter your mode of transportation. So she returns to waiting, which seems now to be the default position of her life. She waits for him to come home on Christmas Eve, waits for him to finish up the new toy development and marketing campaigns in early spring, waits for him to finish toy production in the fall, and then in the winter to finish training the new reindeer. Oh no, they don't come knowing how to fly, and despite the magic, they don't live forever and are constantly being replaced and retrained. There's a whole Rudolph graveyard out back, each headstone only distinguishable from the next by a Roman numeral, and the intensity of the eerie red glow emanating from the snow around it. Her life is defined by his, always waiting for him to finish a task, never included in it. She doesn't even have her own name, just Mrs. Claus, the chubby, jovial female counterpart of her husband's fame. She isn't even chubby. By now, she's wasted away. How can she eat when she's always worried about Santa putting on enough weight, always fretting over his incessant demand for cookies? Ooh, spooky cookies! So, cookies, that's where we left off. It wasn't always like this. Those first few Christmases she spent in the back of the sleigh, organizing presents and checking names off the list as the wind whipped her hair and cold bit her cheeks. He needed her then, before the elf population growth and eventually GPS tracking and the Nice and Naughty app. Back then, she was part of something. Holly knocks softly. Mrs. Claus nods. Well, we've well lost track of the sleigh, ma'am. What do you mean lost track of it? He's no longer showing up on the GPS. I'm just letting you know, ma'am. I'll tell you as soon as we have any more information. Holly doesn't inspect her expression this time, just hurries away. There was something in her eyes as she spoke, or rather a lack of something, a missing sparkle, which is a grave rarity for elves. Mrs. Claus feels her chest tighten. She thinks of him out there, of course not wearing his long underwear, just that ridiculous red and white coat. He likes to pretend he's Vin Diesel or The Rock or Jason Statham, strong, virile men who have no need for long underwear or vegetables. Just cookies and milk, straight up with a side of steroids. But Santa skips the steroids, not good for keeping his stomach like a bowl full of jelly, and to defy a night before Christmas would be a travesty. She watches the snow fall thick and white, weighing down branches until they fall to the ground. Santa will cut them up for firewood once the snow melts in the summer. She feels bad for them almost, the branches, though she knows how absurd that sounds. She understands what it's like to feel weighed down, buried, like no one can see you. She raises her eyes skyward, looks at the snowflakes still floating down lightly, not trapped under the weight of others, just free. She imagines herself driving the sleigh, a new one with more glitter. She'd always ask for directions, never spend hours zooming over China like Santa did a few years ago. She'd make herself a new outfit, a full bright skirt with real fur edges, PETA be damned. She wouldn't be either of the two costume options listed on Amazon, an aging, outdated old woman or slutty Santa girl in a too short skirt. And she'd give the kids books because they all play too many video games, and she'd be harsher about the naughty list because so many of those kids are too spoiled. And instead of cookies, the children would leave out wine and cheese. And best of all, she'd fly. She'd make those reindeer go faster than they ever have, higher than ever, until the oxygen got too thin to breathe. She'd redefine a woman's touch from the way she baked cookies and mended Santa's coat to the firm grip she had on the reins, the strength and speed with which she rappelled down the chimney. She was thinner than Santa anyway. She wouldn't need the help of magic to get down, an enhancement Santa took with more shame than men who take Viagra to get up. She could do this. But suddenly there's the jingling of bells, followed by that full-bodied, robust, fake laugh she'd heard too many times, the one that made her feel empty, the one that made her long for the real laugh she hadn't heard in too long. Ho, ho, ho. He was home. Oh, that sound, the joy that kills.
Our next reader is Cameron. Yeah. Kind of guy. Alright, let me tell you about him. Cameron is a second-year poet in the program and a co-coordinator for Speakeasy! Exclamation point. When he's not busy being the best camera operator ever, he also spends time tutoring student athletes at the Pitt. So far this semester, at least 4 students have told him he looks just like John Legend. And while it's flattering, it's also a constant reminder of how he gave up learning to play the piano as a kid and missed his calling as a sexy piano man. Cameron.
Anyway. Alright, so I'm going to start with a couple poems from a series I've been working on in a workshop that are based off of Thorn Merchant poems by Yusuf Komunyakaa. And these poems are called The Trash Composer. So I'm going to start with the first one. It is morning, and his eyes ponder the names of colors on cracked crayons. In the paper pile, he lays way down, thinner than a 9-cent dime. His hand catches the slick of a magazine, pulls the page up, hoping for sheet music. Instead, he reads about the pieces that were cut from the Shroud of Turin, each one lost in a chemical swirl, the gaping mouth of a vial. His hands hold the crumpled corner of the page, his fingers dotted long ago with paper cuts from a love letter. His garbage throne shifts under his weight. A bone inside a bone is breaking. There are small memories at work underneath a microscope. He knows the more a thing is understood, the more it is destroyed. It only takes a quorum of matter to keep eternity alive. The thought shampoos on his brain. In the distance, a trumpet blares asthmatically, his blood crooning around each failed note. Above the lip of the dumpster, people are talking, the kind who speak only from the neck, the kind who don't know a song from an echo. But the words inside him are not these. The chip on his shoulder is made of sawdust. Their song is not his song, which is to say, every rib in his body is a tuning fork waiting to be struck. This next one is called The Trash Composer's Assistant. None other than the Bishop of Blues, aka Hank the Hot Stepper, godfather of brass and barbells, flexing that sharkskin double-breasted suit with the matching trumpet case. It's no wonder how he rolls into town on white wall tires with more pep than 76 trombones in the morning sun. Manhole covers rattle like snake tails and belch sewer steam on his black suede shoes. With nothing more than a shrug and a swagger step, he brings out the sinners in a septic city, shaking tempest hard, and for a time, the people are all agog with bravado like a 10-foot tuba. When he enters the nightclub, he casts a wily wink toward Karma, orders an old-fashioned and gulps real smooth. Never mind her spell has already molted in his heart, a little bit of death sinking in like a splinter, or the Savella family's mend high and tight on his neck where his close shave stops. Could have seen it coming. He's at the coat check whistling Rhapsody in Blue, and no one says a word while the mob moves outside like a rugby scrum, backlit in scarlet. the hot stepper's teeth filling the cold cracks in cobblestone. A pale horse clip-clops the street, while inside a high note hits the air, ringing like a syllable for revenge. Alright, this poem is called My Uncle Used to Be a Firefighter. Just like my grandfather before him, part of the same thread, except my uncle was always in the hospital. Dad told me he couldn't do stuff that other people could. He has a much harder time with things now. I never met him. For me, he existed only on the lips of my father or in his heavy eyes after he would visit him. So I would picture my uncle with no arms, or as a ghost. And sometimes I imagined that he was the bedpost spider scurrying into the pillow flaps. When I flipped them to the cool side, cobwebs came undone. After thunderstorms, I would greet every puddle with the thick of my boot and think the ripples looked a lot like his smile, dimpled with the reflections of clouds squeezed of rain and shade. Staring into the puddle, I didn't know if my foot or his laugh made the whole sky shake. The day I wrote him a letter, my words came out sizzling, as if I were writing with matches, fighting the hot flicker of my thoughts, the constant friction of the fire I couldn't keep from burning. It was the day Dad came back from the hospital holding a small black jar, the day my hands became torches, looking at the page. Once the letter had been scorched, he leaned in, as slow as spider silk drifting, said, "Dead men have no shadows." My last lesson in love came in tears when Dad held the marble jar below the lip of the desk, adding the ashes of the page in with a gentle slide, like a boy clutching his favorite action figure after it breaks. This one's called Letter to Samuel. Dear Mrs. K, suppose I told you that as a boy, I wanted to be white so bad, I smashed my mom's coffee cup to pieces one morning before school, pressed my arm into the brown of the puddle, and dragged it through hot porcelain, trying to rip away the black from my skin just so I could be like the other kids in class. Under the kitchen light, my wide-eyed little sister grew pale. I was screaming, and my mother tried not to sob as she pulled me up from the mess. When she asked why, I could only keep screaming that I didn't want to be black anymore. I remember the sound in her voice, the splat of a rock dropped into silt, the quick hush of a wave licking up more silt to bury the rock. I would have cared about her tears if I weren't blind with my own. Suppose I told you, Mrs. K, that I wanted to be invisible in the sunglass hut while the clerk watched me move between the display cases. I remember how the fear earthquaked my 13-year-old bones, and when she whispered into the phone, "I'm not a babysitter," I felt the Morse code in her voice grow and grow into the footsteps of the security guard. "Son, you're going to have to find a new store." Shoppers watched him escort me outside, where I asked, "Where should I go now?" "Anywhere but here." You should know, Mrs. K, that I saved the clerk's life after I told my dad what happened, and begged him not to go back. I know it must have been hard for you the morning you told your daughter she couldn't be with me anymore. Hard to say, him or us. I know the things you wanted me to be because I wanted them long before you did. I know how pain sounds in a mother's voice. But you should know, Mrs. K, that rock felt lodged in the throat, that seismic sink of sand into lungs is the way I have felt every day of my life. And this last poem is called Supernova, and it's actually after Kim Grabowski. I want to tell you about the little girl I've been babysitting. She has coarse black hair, mini braids with multicolored plastic beads at the ends. She has red-brown skin, like me. She has a smile like a new galaxy being born, and she asks tough questions. How do clouds stay in the sky? How much rain does it take to make a rainbow? I've learned to come up with some crazy theories. Half an ocean tossed into the sky. A million little birds towing little strings tied to the clouds' silver linings. To be honest, I'm afraid of the questions she isn't asking. Why does Mommy work so late? Why won't Daddy come and watch me? Why won't Daddy ever come and watch me? She reminds me how close we all are to explosion, I want to tell you that things always break apart from the center. On the other side of the universe, bombs go off that we never know about for millennia. Whole nations and people have flourished and floundered before humans notice their fading light. I've been told in 50,000 years the Little Dipper will resemble more of a bent, crushed Coke can, the hind leg of Ursa Minor collapsing into its gut. I'm afraid we will become like the stars of Draco, our serpentine curve twisted into shipwreck. To prevent this, I'd travel warp speed to put my mouth on your mouth, where the meaning-making happens, tie strings to our galaxies and drag them together across the ocean of space. I want to take the boiling stone from your core, name it dignity, mold it while hot, and cool it into something the world will recognize. But why should my hands reshape anything inside of you? I want to know that America still has room for black love, for black families. I want light years before the next supernova. I've been told that since the time of Christ, the three kings of Orion's belt have pointed to the brightest star. Sometimes I wonder how even they stay in the sky. Last night, I dreamt Emmett Till visited Ferguson, Missouri. Nobody recognized him. Not until he lay down next to Michael Brown's body. Not until he kissed him. Thank you.